Okay, good morning. Today's daf is daf Kuf Yud Gimel and Bava Kamma. We are near the bottom of Kuf Yud Bet. I'm a bet. Let me share my screen and we will get started. Yesterday the Gemara discussed court messengers, and so we're just going to pick up effectively in the middle of that discussion, but it's really now a new topic because that was mentioned only in passing. And so now we're going to talk about court messengers. So we begin the middle of the fourth line from the bottom of Kuf Yud Bet Amud Bet, and the Gemara is going to highlight some related rules. So Amar Ravina, 5 words from the end of the line, a fourth line from the bottom. So Amar Ravina, Hai Shlucha de Rabbanan Mehemnin, the leg bevei trey, that kivei trey, excuse me, that the agents of the court, when they come back and say we gave the message to to the person to the person who's supposed to come to court, they are believed like two witnesses. But when we say that, we only mean in connection with excommunicating them should the person not come. But to actually write a bill of excommunication, since it will cost a person money. And what is that? Because somebody is going to be paying the money to the scribe. We don't do that. And Rashi helps us out here. So Pasicha is a shtar shamta. It's a document that creates that formalizes the excommunication. The kisharu le shamta. And when we say that we allow as a result of the testimony of this one witness to create an excommunication, lo sharile adi yahev zuze de psicha l'sapra. That I'm sorry. And when and the issue is that, and when we've so my apologies, I read that incorrectly. V'chisharu le shamta, and when the excommunication gets permitted, meaning that it's that the excommunication as a result of this shtar shamta gets terminated. Lo sharule, we don't terminate it for the subject of the excommunication until they pay the amount that is owed to the sofer, to the person who wrote the document. Because of course in those days any document that was written required some kind of payment to the sofer, and so as a result we're not going to put it down in writing because we're not going to cause a monetary loss for somebody as a result of one witness, but we will excommunicate them as a result of one witness. So that's the distinction that we're making. So
Can you say that Rashi again? I got lost when you stopped and started again. And
no worries. Let's do the Rashi again inside. So Psicha, it's 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11 lines up. Shtar Shamta. A Psicha is Shtar Shamta is a document that causes excommunication. V'chisharule Shamta, and when that excommunication that has been created by a Psicha is terminated, lo sharule, it's not terminated ad yahev zuzah de Psicha l'sapra, until the person who was the victim of subject of that excommunication gives the zuz that the psicha cost to the sofer. And so that's that. And as a result, we're not going to write that document based on the testimony of the one witness, because that would cause us to basically force somebody to lose money based on a single witness. And we do not, that would on some level undermine the Torah's requirement of 2 witnesses, and so we're not going to allow the person to do that.
When you say terminated here, it means that it takes effect, right?
No. Terminate means end. It means it meaning that let's say just to do simple. So Sam refuses to go to court. So they write a shamta for him. With maybe in this case there were 2 witnesses that indicated that he refused to go to court. So they wrote an excommunication to him. And so now Sam says, all right, I'll come to court. So before we end that excommunication and allow him, and he shows up in court and he says, okay, I'm here. So we're now going to terminate that excommunication. Before that excommunication can be terminated, Sam needs to pay for the cost of writing the Shamta in the first place.
So it becomes null and void. The
Correct.
proposed
The
excommunication
becomes null and void, but you
Okay.
have to pay for it before that will happen. Okay, so that was rule number one. Rule number two, Ravina gives us another lesson. So, Ravina, Yavin, and Zimna, Apuma deitza, that we are even allowed to use a woman of Apuma de Shibve, and we'll also use neighbors of a person to communicate the summons. And again, that summons can, if it's not listened to, it can result in the person being excommunicated. Below Amran Ela Delese B'masa. But that's only a situation where the person being summoned is not in the same town as the court. Because if, in fact, he's in the court or in the same town, Aval Isei B'masa, as we turn to Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, we're not going to say that. Damrina, because we're worried that the person who's not a professional court messenger, that person's going to say, Amr lo amrulay, they maybe they didn't actually because we say, excuse me, that maybe this person didn't actually convey the message. Da amre, because they're going to say, Ashkechinu shlicha debase dina ba'amrlay, because almost certainly the court's messenger is going to find him. So we don't need to be worried about our doing our job. And so as a result, when an unofficial person is being sent out, it only works when it's being sent out to out of town. And we're also saying this also when we know that the person, when the person who is being summoned isn't somebody who's coming to court on a regular basis, either coming to court or passing the court. But if he regularly passes the court, then again, we're going to be concerned, Amri Ashkechui Beidina Amri Lay, because maybe they'll say, listen, our job isn't so important, so we won't necessarily finish it, because the Beit Din itself may have seen him. And additionally, we're only talking about a situation where we know that the person summoned is going to be at home. But if we know that person is on a business trip and he's not coming home that day, again, we won't rely on this kind of informal summons, because because maybe they'll forget. So as a result, we end up with three caveats that we do use women and neighbors, but it's only when the litigant doesn't have an obvious other way of learning about it, and that the person is expected to be home so that the communication can happen bo bayom on that same day. Okay, having now referenced excommunication, so we're going to now note, and indeed we even talked in Rashi about that as part of the ripping up of the excommunication, it's only going to be ripped up when the subject of that excommunication pays for the cost associated with it. But now we're going to have Rava highlight two other categories of when we will or won't continue an excommunication. So, hi, Mandik, I'm a Rava. Hi, Mandik, Siv, alei psicha, al delo asiladina. If we have somebody against whom we've written an excommunication for the fact that they haven't come to court, we're not going to actually tear it up until he actually comes to court. Al delo sayas diladina, but if in fact he's just not obeying, so adit sayas of lo makrinan like, we're not going to necessarily. So again, we won't rip it up until he obeys. So if in fact we tell the person that he owes $100 and he hasn't yet paid the $100, we will refuse to tear it up. Below he. Actually, that's not the case. That second rule of Rava, is not necessarily in fact the case. Because once he says, I'm going to obey, karinanly, then we're going to cut it up, tear it up. And let's just take a look at some Rashis here. So first, Adelot Sayis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. Adulot sayis lebei dina sha'amrulo, that the Beit Din said to him, say tainlo, you go out and give this money to the other person below kiyim, and he has not fulfilled it. So that's the situation of the second situation. So one situation was where he doesn't come to court. The second situation is where he doesn't obey, and it's talking about where he doesn't obey because he's been commanded. Below he, and we said that that's not in fact the case, but rather kaven to Amar sitzayesna karana, that once he says he will obey, we're going to tear it up. La alter, we'll tear it up immediately once he agrees to obey. Because maybe the issue is that he just doesn't have money now. So if he refuses to tell us that he's going to obey and he just does nothing, so then we'll write the excommunication. But if he tells us that he's going to obey, then we're going to listen to him. V'tarach, because now he's going to be busy trying to get the money. Aval be'asa ladina. But when it comes to coming to court, there we're not going to tear it up right away because kol kamadalo asi afgarusa that as long as he has not come, he is being disrespectful to the court. And so as a result, therefore, we're going to wait until he actually gets to the court in order to tear up that excommunication. Rav Chisda. So now we have Rav Chisda give us details for when we excommunicate for failure to showing up to court. It's not as simple, except as we'll have a caveat, but it's usually not as simple as you invite the person, he doesn't show, and then you excommunicate the person, because Amar Rav Chisda hovim zman sheni v'chamishi v'sheni, that we set up a Monday, a Thursday, and a Monday. Of course, Mondays and Thursdays were when the court met. Zimna v'zimna basar zimna. We have an invitation, another invitation, and another invitation. So basically 3 invitations. Ulamachar kasvinan. And then the next day, meaning the Tuesday after the last Monday, we're gonna then we'll write the document that excommunicates him. And Rashi explains Kovensman. We set up the time. So liyom sheni b'Shabbos, to the Monday, to the second day of the week. V'im lo yavo, and if he doesn't come on that Monday, mazminin oso liyom chamishi, we'll invite him for Thursday. V'im lo yavo, and if he doesn't come on that Thursday, mazminin oso liyom sheni, we'll give him another chance. He goes until the Monday. V'ad lemachar, and then on the day after, meaning on Yom Shlishi, lo kasvinan v'ad lemachar, and until the Tuesday, lo kasvinan psicha, we're not going to write the excommunication document, because we'll wait the entire day of Monday, because maybe he'll show up at the very end. So as a result, only on Tuesday will we actually write the document. Now, what happened in an actual situation? Rav Asi ikla be Rav Kahana. Rav Asi was visiting Rav Kahana. That there was a woman that Rav Kahana summoned to go to court in the evening. V'tzapra kasiv alav psicha. And the next morning, he wrote an excommunication against her. So Amar lei. So Rav Asi asked, Lo savar lamar lahada Amar Rav Chisda koven zman sheni v'chamishi v'sheni. What about Rav Chisda, who says that we have to do a Monday, Thursday, Monday? So Amar lei hani mili gavra. That's only with respect to men. Do anus v'leise b'masa, because they could be very busy and as a result unable to come because they're out of town. Aval itza kevan de isa b'masa lo asya moredesi. But when it comes to a woman who's always in town, if she doesn't come, so then it's a sense of rebellion, and as a result, that's going to have a problem, and we're going to write her the excommunication immediately. Obviously, this would change in modern days when we have both men and women engaged in business. Okay, so Amar Rav Yehuda. So now some more details of what times that we do not summon people to court, because of course now the summoning is very key to whether or not we're going to excommunicate them. So Rav Yehuda, lo yavin and zimna lo b'yomi nisan v'lo b'yomi tishrei. We're not going to invite people to come to court in Nisan and Tishrei. Now Rashi has lo yavin and zimna b'yomi nisan. That those are times of cutting and gathering, and so as a result, that's why we're not going to to invite them because they're busy in the field. Obviously, that's not the only potential reason. It could be that it's because of the holidays, but Rashi says that it's because of the work in the field. Below B'mali Shabsa, and we're not going to invite them to come. Below B'mali Yom Tova, below B'mali Shabsa, and we're not going to invite them to come on the day before a Yom Tov, and we're not going to invite them on the day before Shabbos. Abal Nisan, Lebasar Yom Nisan. However, we can invite in the month of Nisan for after the month of Nisan. Ubi Yomei Tishrei, Lebazar Tishrei. And we can invite in the month of Tishrei for after Tishrei. So Kavinan, then we would invite the person. Mimale Shabsa, Levasar Male Shabsa, Lo Kavinan. However, when it comes to inviting somebody on Erev Shabbos for immediately after Shabbos, so no, we're not going to do that. And why? Because my timer, the Shabbos Tarid, that on Friday he's so busy with Shabbos that he'll put it to the side and he won't necessarily remember. And as a result, we won't do that. We don't want to set people up for failure. So Amar Rav Nachman, lo ya'avina zimna, lo livnei chala b'chala, lo livnei rigla b'rigla. We don't invite people who come to the kala during the kala, and we don't invite people who come to the rigla during the rigla. So what are the kala and the rigla? So thankfully Rashi tells us, livnei kala b'kala, bon lishmoa hadrasha. This is, about 4 lines up, opposite the fourth to last of the narrow lines in the Gemara. Rashi says, "Libnei kala b'kala, ban lishmoa hadrasha." They come to hear the rabbi give a drasha, b'kol Shabbat, on every Shabbos. Ein omrin lo, you don't say somebody who comes to that. Ba b'yom sheni, come on Monday, ledin, for the court. Dememana, because as a result they would refuse to come to the drasha below Asi Lakala, and then they won't come to they won't come to the drasha. The rigla, what is a rigla? That is a different kind of drasha. That's ba'an lishmoa hilchos haregel kodem haregel shloshim yom. That 30 days before the holiday, they come to hear the laws of the holiday. And so as a result, we don't want people to not come to these. And so as a result, we won't use that as an opportunity to deliver a summons. Yihavu asal the kamei Rav Nachman. And people would come to Rav Nachman and say, listen, I want to summon somebody who's coming to this kala to court. And Amar lahu, and he would say to them, am I gathering people for you? Of course not. We're gathering to learn Torah. So ba'inna. Now, however, to Ika Ramai, there are people who are really tricky. So Chayshinan, now we're concerned that they're going to try to, they'll come to the drasha, but they'll successfully hide themselves every other time of the week. And as a result, they won't be able to be summoned to court. And so as a result, now we will give them a summons even on Shabbos. Amar Haya Davar. So now we return back to our original Mishnah. And the Mishnah had said that if the robber took real property, the heirs are liable to pay back the owner.
What's the difference between the statement here regarding the kala, which is Rashi seems to interpret as the drasha for Shabbos, as opposed to the earlier statement a few sentences ago where he talked not on the Erev Shabbos? Well, where's the distinction there?
Excellent question. So the Erev Shabbos was the time to come to court. That we would not summon somebody to come to court on a Friday. And we said we would not summon somebody to come on Friday for Sunday. But here we're summoning somebody to come on, and the reason is because they're so busy working on to prepare for Shabbos that we're worried that they won't remember. But here we're inviting somebody on Shabbos to come for Monday. So as a result, that we do because they're not so busy, so they're going to remember they're being invited, and they're not, and it's not to come on Shabbos. It's not to come to court on Shabbos. It's to come to court on the Monday. So as a result, it doesn't violate any of the rules that we had before.
No, we say we don't invite them on Shabbos. Ba'im l'shmoa hadrasha. You don't invite them. They don't know.
That was the original position. But then v'ha'idna de'ika ramai, when there are people who are so tricky, so chayshinan, we're worried that if we don't invite them on Shabbos, they're going to get away with it. They're not going to be able to ever be summoned. So that's the conclusion of the Gemara, is that actually we do worry about that. But that's the point that the Gemara is trying to make. Now I don't know that. Yeah, I mean, and so
So
that,
then the court is working on Shabbos. This court is essentially working on Shabbos. They're
well,
sending
they're
people out.
sending they're sent they a messenger. Remember, they could have sent the messenger 3 weeks ago, but the guy never found the defendant until he came to the drasha. And so what's happening on Shabbos is only the message is being conveyed by the messenger to the litigant, that you are invited hereby to come to court because somebody is suing you.
But it seems like the court is actually, the messenger is actually doing work for the court on Shabbos then.
Yes, absolutely. But that work for the court, it doesn't involve any malacha, is just conveying a message. It's saying you've been invited to court and you need to show up on Monday.
Well, the messenger's getting paid for that, right?
That, you know what, we haven't discussed that. I don't know the answer to that question. But the point is that even if the messenger is paid for that, he's not paid for the specific work on Shabbos. He's paid for the job. The job doesn't have any requirements.
Okay.
It's sort of like the rabbi of a shul,
Right.
etc. So
Yeah.
that would be permitted on Shabbos, even if he were paid. Okay. So we said in the Mishnah that if there's real property in the estate, even if the something that was robbed was left to the heirs, they do need to return the property. So meaning, and if it was real property that was stolen, that's how we understood this. Now, of course, there was that second understanding that was offered. But the bottom line is that right now we're going to teach the version that Rebbe taught his son. So Masdi Rebbe Shimon Berei. So Rebbe taught his son, Rebbe Shimon, Lo davar sheyesh bo achrayas mamish. When we say that the property that was stolen was real property, we don't mean actual real property. That we're talking about a situation where you steal a cow and it's being used for plowing, or a donkey and it's being used to to carry loads and being walked behind. The heirs need to return this item because of the honor of their father. So, and answering the question that you asked, Ken, before, the halakha is that we don't treat that this understanding of Rebbe sort of is consistent with the understanding of our Mishnah as being that if that the heirs are effectively like purchasers. But in fact, we do not paskin that way. We actually say that heirs are not like purchasers, meaning that even with Yeyush, the heirs would have an obligation to pay back. And so that was addressing your question. And it's only according to the opinion that we don't actually hold like that says this. And so as a result, again, Rebbe said that not only is a situation when you have real property that was stolen, do you need to give it back? Do the heirs need to give it back? But even when it's something that's public, because the fact that it's public, everybody's going to say, as we saw in Rashi previously, that this is a stolen item, and we want to show respect to the father, and that would be disrespectful to allow people to say that. So as a result, even if it's a cow or a donkey that's being used in public, that's going to be an issue, and therefore the heirs are going to return it. So Rav Kahana,
would that apply to a slave if they stole a slave?
Yeah, sure, I would think so.
Well, we learned earlier weeks ago that a slave can move, whereas the other objects don't necessarily move. You have to move them. You have to carry them. So these other things, the plow, the so forth, the slave can walk away.
Yes, that's true. But I would still think that given the fact that the property, slaves are considered like property,
right?
And so like real property, and here real property is explicitly the case that we're covering. So I would think that even if a slave was stolen, it would also be issued. But let's take a look and see. Rav Kahana is going to ask Rav about other things, and we'll see. I guess that none of them are really directly related to that, but again, I think we can combine all of these to say that I think that a slave would be covered as well. So by mine Rav Kahana me Rav Mita umisev aleha, if you have a bed that the people use, shulchan v'ochel alav, or a table that the people eat on, mahu, is that considered? And Rashi tells us, mita v'shulchan mahu. It's about opposite the fourth wide line in the Gemara. Kavan demidi dekoi bego beitai, that since this is something that is in the internal aspect of the house, below mitchazi la'alma, and isn't visible to the world, kipara v'chamor, like a cow and a donkey, v'leika zilusa davuon, maybe there isn't any kind of degrading of their father. Odilma, or alternatively, because sometimes people come into your house and they'll see it. There is going to be some degrading of the father. So that's the question. And the answer is Amar Lo, in a sort of very rabbinic kind of method. Rab responded, Tein l'chacham v'kamod. Give, as it says in Mishlei, give to the wise man, and he'll become even wiser. And so v'yakim od, and Rashi tells us what was intended. Kipara v'chamor, that treated kain mita v'shulchan, treat like a even the cow and the donkey, a bed and a table. So the bottom line is that we see that anything that would be visible needs to be returned. And so, and again, I would, and so we have real property, movable property, and animals. And if you combine all three of them, certainly I would think that slaves would also be needed to be returned as well. Okay. So now we get to the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah addresses the prohibition of benefiting from stolen property. Ein portin lo mitebas hamochsin v'lo b'mikis shel gabayin v'ein notlan mehen tzedakah. That you're not going to make change from the box of the customs tax collector or from the purse of the tax collector. And you don't take tzedakah from those items either. Aval notel hu mitok beito, but you can take the coins that the tax collector has in his home, o min hashuk, or what he carries with him in the street. But you just can't do business directly out of his box, because out of the box, that's going to be assumed to be stolen items. Okay, as Rashi says, ein portin lahachlif sulaim beprutos, to exchange a sela for a prutas, for the prutas that are worth it. So miyad muchtim, from the hands of the customs tax collector, litola prutos mitebasan, to take it out of their box, shenotnin ba maos hamechas, where they put the money from the taxes. Mekis shel gabai hamechas, and similarly from the pocketbook of the from the purse of the person who's doing that collecting of the regular income tax. Shegova kesef gulgolet va'arnuna lefisha hein shel gezel, and because that they are taking the money per head and based on wealth, and then as a result, it's going to be those are stolen things. It's as if they're taking stolen things, and so you're benefiting from stolen items. Okay, so now the Gemara makes a very big qualification. Tana aval nosin lo dinar v'nosin lo es hashar. But if you only have $100 bill and your tax bill is only $50, so then you can give that $100 bill and get change. You don't have to give exact change to the tax collector. When you are paying the tax, you're allowed to take essentially a refund. It's only when you benefit by making change and they're at no cost, that's where we're going to say that you're effectively benefiting from stolen goods. Okay, so now we're going to ask, isn't this a tax? And don't we have a very famous statement? And we're going to jump into a very famous discussion of something that we've all probably heard before. Because umochsin, are we going to try and is the money of a tax collector a customs tax collector, is that considered stolen? V'ha'amar Shmuel dina de malchusa. We have a general principle that the law of any kingdom, wherever we live, that's the law. You're not allowed to violate, U.S. tax law. So Amar of Chanina bar Kahana, Amar Shmuel, b'mocha she'ein lo kitzva. So we're going to talk. We were referring to a customs collector who doesn't have a limit on how much he collects, as Rashi says. She'ein lo kitzva. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. She'ein lo kitzva ela noto kechol chavtso. He can take whatever he wants. So as a result, that kind of tax collector is a thief. And the alternative, debate Rabbi Yanai Amri, Rabbi Yanai says, the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai says, the moches ha'omed me'alav. We're talking about a tax collector, a customs tax collector, who appoints himself me'alav. Shalom, as Rashi says, again, now 6 lines up in Rashi, Shalom Esa Melech. It's not from the king. The king didn't do it. Afilu yeshlo kitzva. And so as a result, even if there was a limit to how much he would take, and he was just saying he was, had a system to it, that he's essentially a criminal. And so as a result, that's that those are the situations where we would say this. But in general, we would say dina de malchusa dina. And so that's the key is that we're talking about in our Mishnah a situation where we do not.
Well, what is the case? The first case of Shmuel, Amar Shmuel? Do you have a tax collector who collects whatever he wants, even though he's appointed by the governor? He can collect as much as he wants. What does that mean?
Correct. Exactly. Meaning the point is that you used to be, right? You would kings would sell the right to be the tax collector. The tax collector would pay the king some amount of money, and then he would be able to do whatever he wanted, whatever taxes he could collect, he would be able to keep. And so as a result, that kind of tax collector is not the kind of tax collector where we say dina de malchusa dina. Okay,
That just sounds. It's hard to believe that he can do whatever he wants. He's not working for the governor anymore. He's working for himself.
You're exactly right, and that's why that person is considered a thief, and not the king, and not as if the king is making a rule. That's exactly right. But if you take a look in history, you'll see that tax collection rights were often sold. And sometimes the tax collector, usually the king would probably put some kind of limit on how much the tax collector could collect. But if that limit were not enforced, so then the tax collector could collect whatever he wanted, whatever he could. And in those situations, that would not be considered enforcing the law of the land.
Never knew that.
Yeah. So there are some who said that the answers that we just gave about a tax collector with no limit, or a tax collector who appointed himself, really like a mobster, that it wasn't in connection with our Mishnah that it was taught, but it was connection with the following debate, that machlokas that we see between a Mishnah and Rabbi Akiva. Lo yilbash adam kalayim afilu al gabi asara begadim lahavriach bo es hamechas. That if you're trying to avoid the tax, the import tax, the customs tax, you're not allowed to wear kalayim, even if it's over 10 garments. Meaning that even if it's not really for clothing, we're still not going to allow you to wear it. Masniz and Deloka Rabbi Akiva. Now that Mishnah seems not to be like Rabbi Akiva. Titania, Asur lahavriach es hamechas. You can't avoid the tax collector, the customs tax collector, by wearing kalayim. Rabbi Shimon, Omer Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shimon says in the name of Rabbi Akiva, Mutar lahavriach es hamechas. You're allowed to avoid it. Again, all in connection. It's discussing kalayim. So Bishlam Inyan Klein, when it comes to Klein Bahakamivlagi, this is what they're arguing about. Damar Sabar Davar She'ain Miskabin Mutter. That one says that when you put something on and you're not wearing it as clothing, but rather for some other intended purpose, so then that's not considered as if you're violating the mitzvah of Kalayim because you're not wearing it as clothing. Umar Savar Davar She'ain Miskabin Usser. And the other people say, listen, at the end of the day, you're wearing it. Doesn't make a difference what your intention is. You're wearing it. It's going to be violating Kalayim. But how did they have this debate in the first place? Because why are they even talking about the possibility of avoiding the customs? So again, we have our two answers. Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Kahana, Amar Shmuel, b'mocha she'ein lo kitzvah. We're talking about a customs collector who has no limit to it. Debei Rabbi Yanai Amri, and again, b'mochas ha'omen me'elav. We're talking about a customs collector who appointed himself. The Ika Damasni, aha. These two answers, there are some people who said it wasn't even about that debate that those two answers were given. It was about the following. Because we have this Mishnah in Maseches Nedarim, Nodrin lahargin laharagin ulacharamim ulamochsin, that you're allowed to make a false vow to murderers and plunderers and tax collectors, custom tax collectors. Shehid shall truma, saying that something is truma. Shehid shall base melech, that it belongs to the king. Afal pisha eina shel truma, afal pisha eina shel melech, even if it's not true. Ulamochsin. So 1 second, the Gemara asks, 1 second, how can you allow them to avoid paying tax collectors? Amar Shmuel, Dina Dina. Again, we have that general rule that law of the land is the law. So Amar Rav Chanina bar Kahana Amar Shmuel b'mocha she'ein lo kitzvah. Again, it's a tax collector who has no limit. The very Rabbi Yanai Amri, no b'mochas ha'omen me'ilav. We're talking about a tax collector who appointed himself. And Rav Ashi Amar, and this is going to lead us into a new discussion, b'moches Kanani. Maybe we're talking about a non-Jewish, a Canaanite tax collector. So so as a result, and a Canaanite tax collector is effectively a tax collector who has no limit, who's not going to follow the law of what he's allowed to collect. He'll try and collect anything he can. And so even if we don't necessarily know that that's the case, once we know it's a non-Jewish tax collector, we can deal with that. So now that brings us into other cases of, so now we're first going to go to a Canaanite who's making a claim in Jewish court. So maybe it's even this Canaanite tax collector who's coming to court and suing a Jew and saying you need to pay up. So Titania, we have this Baraisa. Meaning, how do I know that we can avoid this kind of tax collector? Because look at this Baraisa. Yisrael uknani anas shebo ladin. If you have a Kanani anas, somebody who's forcing people to pay money, and he comes to judgment against the Jew, he comes to court against the Jew. If you have a basis to say under a Jewish law that that the Jew is exempt, you use Jewish law. If and you tell the non-Jew, that's our law. Bedine Kananim, and if you have a basis to say under the non-Jewish law that he's exonerated, meaning that based on the Jewish law he would be guilty, he would have to pay Zakehu, you can exonerate him. The Emor Lo Kachtinchem, we could say, and this is based according to your law, the Jew wins. The Imlav, and here's the issue, you can buy alav ba'akifin, and if you don't have the law with you, you're allowed to use strategy. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. That's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ein ba'an alav ba'akifan mimnei kiddush Hashem. 1 second, you can't use strategy against somebody like that, because that would violate the concept of Kiddush Hashem. You'd be desecrating Hashem's name, because people will think that the Jews are just trickers. So Rabbi Akiva, and even Rabbi Akiva, right now the Gemara is commenting, time of the Kiddush Hashem. The only problem is because of Kiddush Hashem. How like a Kiddush Hashem buying? If there was a Kiddush Hashem, there wouldn't be a problem. The Gezel Kanani Meshari, but yet this seems to suggest that we would be robbing a Canaanite and robbing somebody who's not Jewish. Vahatanya, Amar Rabbi Yishimon. Rabbi Shimon said, Dabar Zeb, Darish Rabbi Akiva Kishibam Mizifirin, that here's the law that Rabbi Akiva taught when he came from Zephirin. Minayin legezel kanani shehu aser. How do I know that stealing from a non-Jew is prohibited? Talmud Lomar acharei nimkar geula tiyelo. That even after this pasuk is in the context of a Jew that has been sold to a non-Jew, we talk about redeeming the person. We don't say that we're going to just steal him back or something along those lines. You have to buy him back. As we turn to Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Bet, you can't just take him and go. V'yachol yiglom alav, because and now yachol yiglom alav. Now maybe you might think that we should pay whatever is required. So Talmud Lomar, v'chishev im konehu, that you have to do some kind of reckoning with the purchaser. Yedaktek im konehu, you should be careful, you should be exact. You pay what the person's worth, you don't pay more than the person's worth. So that's the story. So now we've seen that the Chumash tells us, the Torah tells us that we don't steal from a non-Jew. So Amar Rav Yosef lo kashya haba kanani haba kertosha. That when we can steal, when we can use subterfuge to take money away, if there's no Achil Hashem, is when we're dealing with a Kanani who is not subject, who doesn't subject himself to the communal laws, and essentially is acting like a thief. Habager Tosha. But if the person is living with us in peace, well, then we would never engage in such behavior. So Amrle Abaye, Vahatar Vayu Gabi Hadadik Sive. Well, 1 second. The concept that you had of saying that we're not allowed to steal, it didn't only refer to a Ger Toshav, it also referred to a Canaanite. So it seems like even the Canaanite you're not allowed to steal from. Because we have a brisa that says Lolacha, not only to you, Ela Lager, but to somebody who's a convert, Shenemar Lager. Lo Lager Tzedek, not only to a convert, a righteous convert, El Lager Toshav, even to a Ger Toshav, because Shenemar Lager Toshav, the pasuk again, these all psukim in connection with a Jew that has been sold to and needs to be redeemed. A mishpachat ger, and then we say a family of ger. That comes to include non-Jews. Shehu omer ola eker, or to an idol. Zeh nimkar la'avodas kochavim. This is even to a one who's sold to an idol itself. So in all of these cases, we have to redeem. You can't just steal the person back. So Ella Amarava lo kasha kan lo v'chan b'havkas halva'aso. One is a situation with robbing the guy. You're not allowed to rob the guy. But when it comes to refusing to pay a debt to the non-Jew, then we would allow that situation. So Amr le Abaye, Eved Ivri Hafkas Halvasohu. But the Eved Ivri himself, it's like a situation of canceling a loan, because after all, canceling a loan is sorry for not scrolling. Canceling a loan, canceling a slave is like canceling a loan, because at the end of the day, the Jew who's been bought still owns himself according to halacha. At least that's what our havamin is at the moment. And so as a result, given the fact that the Jew owns himself according to halacha, so if we're going to, so when we take him back, we're effectively canceling the loan of his services to the non-Jew. So Rava l'taimei, but actually Rava disagrees, and he follows his own reasoning. To Amar Rava, Evet Ivri Gufo Kanoi, that even a Jewish servant is owned by the master, and so as a result, that would constitute actual stealing. And so as a result, we don't allow stealing; we do allow refusal to pay back. So Amar Rav Bivi, Bar Gidel, Amar Rabbi Shimon, Chasida. So again, more rules. So now you might think that stealing is permitted from a non-Jew. So we're going to clarify some of these rules and make clear that stealing is not permitted. Gezel Kanani Usr. Stealing from a non-Jew is prohibited. Eveda, so muteris. However, if he lost something, you don't have to bring it back. Gzelo Asur to Amar Rav Huna, Minayan Legezel Kanani Shu Asur. How do I know that robbery of a Canaanite is prohibited? Shneamar V'achalta es kol ha'amim asher Hashem Elokecha nosein lach. That you are going to consume the possessions of all the nations of that Hashem, your God, will deliver to you. Only when they're delivered to you, that's when you can have their stuff. You can't just steal it. It's only if you conquer them in war. So Aveda so muteres. But when it comes to the lost object, that's permitted. To Amarav Kamma bar Gurya Amarav. How do I know that a lost article of a Canaanite can be taken? That you have to return your brother's lost article. You have to return to your brother who's a Jew, not to somebody who's not Jewish. Maybe that's only true that you don't have to return it when it didn't come into your hand. But once you pick up the item and you see it belongs to somebody else and it belongs to somebody who's not Jewish, you have to return it to that person. No, that you don't have to go after it when it hasn't yet come to your hand. Maybe you have to go and return it. So I'm a Ravina, the fact that it says that which you find, the asli day mashba, that implies that it's already in your hand. So as a result, even if you were to pick it up, you wouldn't have to return it. So Tanya, and we have a brisa, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair Omer, b'makom sheyesh chilul Hashem, afilu avida so asor. However, where there would be any kind of desecration of Hashem's name, so then even the lost article is forbidden to be taken. And that's fundamentally often the case in our days. So Amar Shmuel ta'uso muteris. If a non-Jew makes a mistake, then you're allowed to benefit from it. So we have some examples of these mistakes. Kihad Shmuel zavan mitkusi lakna dahava b'mar deparzalav arbazuze. That Shmuel was buying a gold bowl that the kuti thought was a copper one, and he was buying it for 4 zuz. So v'avla lechad zuza, and so Shmuel gave an extra zuz. In order to sort of say, listen, I'm making a mistake, you're making a mistake, we'll all call it even. Rav Kahana Zavin Mikusi Meya Be'esrim Chaviyasa B'Meya. Rav Kahana realized that he was buying 120 barrels and the Kuti was charging just 100 barrels for 100 barrels. So he gave an extra zuz into the payment. Amar le chazi de Allah kasamichna, and he said to the Kuti, "Listen, I'm relying on you to do all of the accounting. So you count the money, you count the barrels, and if you're good with it, I'm good with it." And since the Kuti, maybe he counted the money and saw he got the extra, and he didn't say anything. So as a result, Rav Kahana was able to keep the 120 barrels. Ravina zaban dikla v'kusi l'tzalcha. So Ravina bought a dikla, a palm tree, with a kuti in order to cut it into 2 halves. So Amrle l'shamye, he said to his assistant, Kadam va'aitim ikaro, go take the bottom limbs. The kuti minyanad yada, because all the kuti is going to do is just count the limbs. He's not going to think about how thick they are. And so as a result, you can use that kind of method to trick a non-Jew. Rav Ashi Rav Ashi was going down the road. Now here, this situation really isn't a trickery situation. Let's take a look and see. Chaza shibsha legufna b'pardesei utile ba kitufe deinve. So he saw that there was a very nice vine that had clusters of grapes that were hanging. So he goes to tell his assistant, Zil chazi idikusi ninhu aite. Go see if it's a kutis and bring them. Idi Yisrael ninhu lo aitile. But if they're Jews, don't bring them. So Shama hahu kuti dehava Yosef b'fardesa fardesa. So there was a kuti who was in his courtyard, in his orchard, and he hears this statement. Amrle, Dukuzi Shari, are you telling me that you could steal from a kuti? Amrle, no. Kuti shakil demei Yisrael. I'm sorry, kuti shakil demei. Yisrael lo shakil demei. That a kuti would take my money, and so as a result, I'm willing to make the deal with him. A Jew, on the other hand, he will want to insist on giving it to me for free, and I don't want to take it for free. Okay, so Gufa. Now we're going to go back and we're going to underline this statement of the law of the land. So Amar Shmuel Dina Demachusa Dina. The law of the land is the law. So Amar Rava says, how do I know that this is the case? Heda, it's true. Dekatle dikle v'gashre gishrei v'avrina nalatu. Because what do the tax collectors do? They go and cut down our trees, and then they make it into bridges, and we go over those bridges. And if those bridges are stolen property, we would not be able to go over the bridges. So it must be that the law of the land is the law, because that actually enables them to take the trees and to confiscate them. So Amar le Abaye, Dilma Mishum da Ayesh Lahu Minaihu Maraihu. Maybe the owners have given up hope, and that's why we're allowed to go over the bridge, because now you've changed the item and it now is a bridge, and as a result, you have again Yeyush and Shinoi,
Sure.
Yeyush and a change to it, and so as a result, it's not based on the concept of Dina de Malchusa. So Amarle, Abaye says no. Idol ilo Dina de Malchusa Dina. Without the concept of the law of the land being the law, would the owners have despaired? They know exactly where their trees are. They could go and take them back. But the bottom line is that the law of the land is the law, and so as a result, it's not stealing when the law of the land takes the property. But when second, the people who chop down the trees for the king, they don't do what the king said, because Malka Amar Zilu Vakitlu Mikol Bagay, because the king tells them to go and take from all of the valleys, meaning you're not supposed to take from just one person, you're supposed to take an equal amount from everybody. The Inhu Azlu Vakadlu Machad got Baga, but often they will go down and just chop down all the trees in one valley, and so one person ends up suffering all of the pain. So the Rabbah explains, it may be that that's the case, but that is permitted. Shlucha de Malka Kamalka lo below Tarach. The king's emissary is like the king himself, and he's not going to spend the extra effort, but rather the inhu afsid anafshayu, right? They're not getting reimbursed for going around, but the iboy lahu de inkatu mikule bage mishkal dmei. But the person who gets take all of his trees get taken, he does have the ability to go around and collect from everybody else. And so as a result, because he has the ability to collect from everybody else, so we're going to allow this, it's not considered as if the tax collectors are robbers, but rather the tax collectors are just moving the aspect of tax collection down the chain, so that now the person from whom they collected should go around and collect from others. But the bottom line is that it's only because of Dina Malchusa Dina that we have this, that the people have given up hope of getting back their stuff, and that's why. And so we see that that's an evidence of this concept of Dina de Malchusa Dina. And of course, we actually hold of Dina de Malchusa Dina, and so definitely don't avoid any tax payments. And of course, our taxes are not like their taxes. Much of their taxes were just going to line the pockets of the king. Here, we're paying for all the services that we get. So in any event, again, just to clarify and make absolutely clear, not justifying any kind of avoidance of taxes. We should make sure to follow the letter of the law and the spirit of the law and pay the taxes that we're owed. But Rava has more to say regarding tax collectors and their efforts. So for those teachings, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
That seems that in the final statement here that there is an imposition on the first person,
correct,
from whom all his trees were taken. He has to go to all the community to essentially recoup what was taken from him from his neighbors. Neighbors say, "Well, it's not my problem." How's this one individual is going to effectively recoup his losses from all the other people in the towns or the next towns? Why would they give their trees to him?
So you're asking an excellent question, and actually Rava's next statement will touch on that specific topic of the fact that when one pays, do they have the right to go around to collect from others? But in this situation, it's clear that the understanding that Rava is offering is that not only would the non-Jewish courts enforce it, but the Jewish courts would similarly enforce the ability of the person whom had all of his stuff collected to collect from the rest of the community. Now you raise a great point that of course that's going to take a lot of work. but it's clear that that's what he's saying. That at least that's my understanding of this Gemara, is that he's definitely would be, it would be enforceable in the court of law. That even if and of course this all followed the discussion of the fact that when you invite somebody to court, they have to come. So we have a mechanism in our system, to really enable people to enable people to obtain the funds that they're trying to collect.
That's from the point of view of the tax collector, but the poor fellow who's lost his whole property because the
No, but
tax collector
he'll
is
get paid back from all the other people. He's going to
right,
get paid.
but the tax collector is too lazy to go out to all the
True,
community. He
true,
goes to the
exactly.
first person that he sees and he takes all the wood. And that
Yep,
person
100%.
suffers.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what's going to happen. Just be thankful that we live in the United States where that doesn't happen, and we don't have tax collectors that have free ride to go around collecting from anybody that they want based on that kind of system. So thank God that we are, that for modern society, we have a lot to be thankful for. All right.
Just one interesting point when we were
Please.
talking about the shotness, not the, is it shot?
Client.
Well, client is shotness. So the people would where they permitted, not permitted. You find today that that often people will wear 3, 4, 5 coats on an airplane to avoid paying for the luggage fee that they would pay if they were to send their coats as luggage. They dress.
So I have not actually seen that. I can believe it, but I have not seen that. But there, of course, it's not a tax. I don't think that would be applying necessarily that rule, as long as they're not taking up room that belongs to somebody else on the plane.
Well, it's not
I
a
might not want
tax,
to.
but they're avoiding a fee. They're
Yes,
trying.
they're avoiding a fee, 100%. But you're allowed to avoid a fee. The question is sort of, if the system is illegal, then it's legal. Obviously, the point is of the tax collection system was an import tax, right? If you brought something in and that was meant to be sellable merchandise, then you had to pay a tax on it. And so what people would do is they would wear it and say it's not actually. Right. And so that's a difference, because here the what the person is essentially saying is that I'm not checking my coat. Well, in fact, they're not checking their coat. It's not as if they're saying my coat is not a coat, which is what there would be happening with the tax collector. So I do think that there are a number of differences.
Oh yeah,
I don't think that would be illegal or improper based on what we've learned. But I do like the analogy. So Yishikoach. All right. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody. Look forward to learning together. Again, this coming week will be only on Zoom, and Dove will be filling in for me. So I will, sorry that I'm going to miss the Siyum of Maseches Bava Kamma, but enjoy that. And I look forward to picking us back up, God willing, with Bava Metzia when I'm back on a week from this coming Wednesday. Have a great Shabbos, everybody.